You are driving a Southern California freeway in 1980, windows down, radio on, and the motorcycle in your mirror is a Kawasaki. Black and white fiberglass fairing, pursuit lights on the windshield, an officer behind it whose right hand is 2 inches from your future. That motorcycle is a KZ1000. The one that just passed you doing 90 in the opposite direction. No lights, no badge, nothing but a rider bent into the wind. That is also a KZ1000. And when you pull into your driveway that night and turn on NBC at 8 o'clock on a Saturday, Officers Ponch and John will come rolling across your television screen on the same machine, splitting lanes on the same stretch of freeway you just drove. One motorcycle owned both sides of that highway, not the left lane, not the right lane, both. And if you happened to be the one running, there was a detail about the police version you did not know until it was too late. Behind the speedometer glass sat a solenoid mechanism. The moment that officer hit the pursuit lights, a needle locked against the glass and pinned your speed, not his word against yours. Glass against fact. That is where this story begins. Not in California, but in a factory on the other side of the Pacific, with a project named after a cut of beef. You are watching Motorcycles and Engines, where we take apart the machines and the companies that built them, down to the camshaft and the engineer who spec'd it. If that is your kind of story, subscribe and stay, because the rise of this motorcycle is just as improbable as the empire it created. The company that built the KZ1000 did not start with motorcycles. It did not start with engines. It started with ships. In 1878, a man named Shozo Kawasaki founded a shipyard in Tokyo, Japan. Within 2 decades, Kawasaki Dockyard was building warships for the Imperial Navy, then locomotives, then rolling stock, then aircraft. By the middle of the 20th century, Kawasaki Heavy Industries was one of the largest industrial conglomerates on Earth, and motorcycles were not even a footnote in its business plan. But in 1924, a separate company called Meguro Manufacturing had been founded near the Meguro River in Tokyo. Meguro built motorcycles, big British-style twins modeled on BSA engines, and by the 1950s, it was Japan's largest and oldest active motorcycle manufacturer. Kawasaki Aircraft, the aviation arm of the Kawasaki Empire, had been supplying engines to Meguro through the late 50s, and in 1964, Kawasaki absorbed Meguro entirely. The merger was strategic. Kawasaki wanted a consumer division. Meguro had the engineers, the sales network, and the institutional knowledge of what made a motorcycle live or die. Those Meguro engineers, men who had spent decades building big displacement twins, walked into Kawasaki's factories and brought the DNA of large-bore motorcycling with them. It was their expertise that would seed everything that followed. By 1962, the partnership had produced the B8 125, a small but commercially successful machine. But Kawasaki's ambitions were not small. The American market was enormous. Honda was selling machines by the hundreds of thousands, and Kawasaki, while it had earned a fearsome reputation with its 2-stroke triples, the screaming H1 Mach 3 and its descendants, knew that 2 strokes would not conquer the American touring and sport market forever. The company needed a 4-stroke, and it needed a big one. In 1967, a team of engineers led by Gyoichi Ben Inamura received a brief. Build a 750 cubic centimeter 4-cylinder 4-stroke motorcycle capable of dominating the American market. The project was codenamed N600, but internally they called it something else. They called it New York Steak because it was supposed to be the finest cut on the menu. Then in October of 1968, Honda unveiled the CB750 at the Tokyo Motorcycle Show, and the entire Kawasaki team went into shock. Honda had beaten them to market with a 4-cylinder 4-stroke. The N600 prototype, the machine they had spent 2 years developing, was suddenly second place before it had ever been sold. A lesser company would have rushed the 750 to production and accepted the loss. Kawasaki did not. The instruction came down from the top: scrap the 750. Raise the displacement to 900 cubic centimeters. Make more power than Honda. Do not come in second. Ben Inamura and product planning manager Sam Tanegashima went back to work. In March of 1971, a designer named Norimasa Kentada was given control of the motorcycle's bodywork, and he was given exactly 1 month to complete it. Tada called his wife, told her he would not be coming home for 30 days, and started drawing. He slept in the factory. He worked nights and weekends. The original plan had called for the 3S philosophy: speed, styling, and sound. Tada's job was to give the machine a visual identity so distinctive that no rider, no dealer, no magazine photographer could confuse it for a Honda. The ducktail rear bodywork, the 4 chrome exhaust pipes catching light in a row, the candy brown and orange paint that would become as recognizable as any livery in motorcycling. The brief demanded one absolute: this machine could not, under any circumstances, be mistaken for a Honda CB750. The engine Inamura delivered used double overhead cams at a time when Honda was still running a single overhead cam. That was the technical statement. The Z1 was not a response to the CB750. It was an answer to it. The production Z1 was unveiled worldwide in a press preview in June of 1972 and released officially at the Cologne Motorcycle Show that September. 903 cubic centimeters, 82 horsepower at 8,500 RPM, a top speed of 130 miles per hour. The retail price was $1,895. On the day it was released, it was the fastest and highest horsepower production motorcycle ever built by a Japanese manufacturer. But Kawasaki was not finished. The Z1 had conquered the showroom. Now Kawasaki needed to conquer the leader class, and that meant 4 more millimeters of bore. The Z1 became the KZ900 in 1976, a transitional model that refined the platform without fundamentally changing it. But in the background, Kawasaki's engineers had been developing a true leader-class engine. In September of 1976, manufacturing commenced on the machine that would carry the name KZ1000. The engine was the Z1 architecture, bored out 4 millimeters, from 66 millimeters to 70, pushing displacement from 903 cubic centimeters to 1,015. Horsepower climbed to 83 at 8,000 RPM for the 1977 model, and by 1978, it reached an even 90. The torque curve fattened in the low and mid-range, making the KZ1000 not just faster than the Z1, but more usable in everyday riding. The exhaust system changed from a 4-into-4 to a 4-into-2 in an attempt to prevent the chronic rusting that had plagued earlier systems. Disc brakes appeared at the rear. The KZ1000A was, in the most literal sense, the Z1's blueprint perfected. Meanwhile, in Lincoln, Nebraska, something else was happening. In 1974, Kawasaki had opened a manufacturing plant there, making it the first Japanese company to build vehicles of any kind in North America. That plant would become the center of a production run that outlasted every executive who approved it. And on the racetrack, the platform was proving itself under pressure. Reg Pridmore won the AMA Superbike Championship in 1977 and again in 1978, both times on Kawasaki Z-Series machines. The KZ platform was winning on the street, winning on the track, and selling faster than dealers could stock it. The Z-Series had proven something that mattered beyond trophies. It proved that an air-cooled inline-4, built heavy and built right, could take punishment that would crack lesser engines. Pridemore's championship bikes were not exotics. They were production machines, tuned and raced hard, and they survived. That durability was not lost on a group of buyers who had nothing to do with racing. They wore uniforms, not leathers. and their interest in the KZ1000 had nothing to do with lap times. It had everything to do with whether the machine would hold together at 120 miles per hour in a pursuit on a summer afternoon in Los Angeles. By the mid-1970s, Harley-Davidson had held a virtual monopoly on the American law enforcement motorcycle market for decades, but Harley-Davidson was in trouble. The company had been acquired by AMF in 1969, and under corporate ownership, quality had slipped. Frames were misaligned. Engines leaked oil from the factory. Police departments that depended on their motorcycles to perform under the most demanding conditions were losing patience. Kawasaki saw the opening and moved with precision. In 1975, they offered a shop-installed police equipment package for the 900 cubic centimeters Z1. In 1976, they produced a factory-built police version. In 1977 came the KZ900 Police Special, and in 1978, Kawasaki delivered the machine that changed everything. The KZ1000C Police, the first Kawasaki motorcycle built from the ground up specifically for law enforcement, designed to compete directly with the Harley-Davidson FLH. It came with a fiberglass fairing, clear windshield, saddle boxes, pursuit lights, folding floorboards instead of foot pegs, a spring-cushioned saddle with a lower backrest, run-flat Dunlop tires, a beefed-up charging system for electronic sirens and radio equipment, and one detail that no other motorcycle on the market offered: a solenoid-equipped speedometer mechanism that trapped the indicator needle against the glass when the pursuit lights were activated. The California Highway Patrol, one of the most demanding law enforcement agencies on Earth, adopted it. The fastest production motorcycle on the American highway had just become the machine that would chase you when you ran. The irony was not yet visible, but it was already built into the frame. And then a television producer named Rick Rosner put 2 actors on those bikes, and a motorcycle company became something no engineer in Akashi had ever planned for. It became a television star. Chips premiered on NBC on September 15, 1977. The show followed 2 California Highway Patrol motorcycle officers, Frank Ponch Poncherello, played by Eric Estrada, and John Baker, played by Larry Wilcox, as they patrolled the freeways of Los Angeles. The first season's ratings were, by the consensus of critics and network executives alike, poor. NBC moved the show from Thursdays to Saturdays for its second season, and it began winning its time slot. By season 3, the 1979-80 season, Chips drew its largest audience. The show earned a Nielsen rating of 21.5, ranking it 18th among all primetime programs in the United States, alongside Dallas, Three's Company, and MASH. Estrada and Wilcox had chemistry on screen that masked a famously difficult relationship off camera, but what held the audience was simpler than either actor. It was the motorcycles. The sound of those KZ engines rolling through the Los Angeles basin, the pursuit sequences filmed on real freeways, the low camera angles that made the machines look like they were devouring the road beneath them. 139 episodes were produced across 6 seasons before the show ended in May of 1983. The first 2 seasons had used the KZ900 police bikes. From season 3 onward, Officers Ponch and John rode KZ1000C models, the same machine that real California Highway Patrol officers were riding on real freeways. The line between fiction and reality dissolved. The motorcycle that chased you in real life was the motorcycle that chased criminals on your television every Saturday night. No advertisement Kawasaki could have purchased would have matched the impact, but the machine that was conquering American living rooms was also conquering American racetracks, and the rider who would prove it beyond all argument had not yet turned 24 years old. To understand what the KZ1000 became in its golden age, you have to see the scale of what it dominated. By 1980, this one platform, this one engine architecture born from the Z1, was simultaneously the fastest production motorcycle available in American showrooms, the primary police motorcycle for state and municipal agencies across the country, the motorcycle on the highest-rated action show on American network television, and a competitive AMA superbike racer. No single motorcycle platform before or since has held all four of those positions at the same time. Start with the street machine. The KZ1000A was elemental. Now 1,015 cubic centimeters of air-cooled, double overhead cam inline 4, breathing through 4 Mikuni carburetors, exhausting through a header system that announced its presence a quarter mile before the headlight appeared. The bore and stroke, 70 millimeters by 66 millimeters, was nearly square, and that geometry gave the engine a character that riders still describe in the same terms 40 years later. It did not scream like a Honda. It did not buzz like a Suzuki. It roared. Deep, mechanical, metallic, a sound that belonged to iron rather than aluminum. Top speed was 132 miles per hour. Weight was 541 pounds dry. The motorcycle did not pretend to be graceful. It was fast, and it was honest about the terms on which it offered that speed. It transmitted every imperfection in the road through the handlebars, and rewarded every correct input with forward thrust that pinned the rider's weight against the seat. Riders compared it to a freight train, and they meant it as a compliment. One owner, writing decades later, called it the small block Chevy of the motorcycle industry, because in stock form, it was fast and as durable as a hammer. A KZ1000A sold new in 1977 for roughly $2,500. A restored original today sells for $5,000 to $9,500. Then there was the law enforcement machine. The KZ1000P, which replaced the C-Series in 1982, was, by most accounts, the only motorcycle ever manufactured solely for police duty. Every other police motorcycle in history, Harley-Davidson included, was a converted civilian model with a police equipment package bolted on. The KZ1000P was built from the factory floor as a police motorcycle and nothing else. It ran the same basic inline-4 architecture, now at 998 cubic centimeters, producing roughly 90 horsepower, sent to the rear wheel through a 5-speed transmission. Run-flat Dunlop tires on 18-inch wheels meant a puncture did not end a pursuit. The fiberglass fairing carried pursuit lights and a full windshield. The charging system was overbuilt to power sirens, radios, and lighting arrays that would have drained a civilian alternator in minutes. Departments ran these machines for 50,000 miles or 3 years before cycling them out, whichever came first, and the motorcycles did not argue with the workload. Officers who had ridden both the Kawasaki and the Harley-Davidson generally agreed on the division. The Kawasaki was the better machine in town, quick through intersections, and agile at low speed, while the Harley was the better cruiser on long highway stretches. But in a pursuit, acceleration and reliability mattered more than comfort, and the Kawasaki won those arguments consistently. The Lincoln, Nebraska plant built the KZ1000P from 1982 through September of 2005, a 23-year production run with over 95% parts compatibility across every model year. A decommissioned KZ1000P in Chips Correct California Highway Patrol livery now fetches $15,000 to $25,000 at specialty auctions. And then there was the racing machine. In 1981, a 23-year-old Californian named Eddie Lawson climbed onto a KZ1000 tuned by crew chief Rob Muzzy and won the AMA Superbike Championship. He won it again in 1982, back-to-back. Muzzy's race-prepared KZ1000 made 149 horsepower on the Kawasaki dyno at the company's headquarters in Santa Ana, California. Lawson called the superbikes of that era big ships, and he captained them better than anyone alive. To commemorate the first championship, Kawasaki associate Mike Vaughn suggested at a sales meeting that the company build a limited-run street replica of Lawson's race bike. The idea took hold. The result was the KZ1000R Eddie Lawson replica, the ELR, released in late 1982. It was based on the KZ1000J, the updated street model, but dressed in Lawson's lime green livery, with a Kirker 4x1 exhaust, remote reservoir, Showa shocks, an oil cooler, wider rear wheel, upgraded cylinder heads, and lowered handlebars. Only 750 were built for the American market. The price was roughly $4,400. Today, a pristine ELR commands $25,000 to $40,000, and the 30 true production racers, the KZ1000S1 models that were essentially Lawson's actual race bike, made street legal, have sold at auction for 10 times their original $11,000 price. Lawson left Kawasaki for Yamaha's 500cc Grand Prix team in 1983 and went on to win 4 world championships between 1984 and 1989. But his legacy at Kawasaki was already cast in green. The air-cooled KZ1000 had conquered the street, the police fleet, the racetrack, and the television screen. No motorcycle in history had occupied all 4 corners of the culture at once. But at the far edge of that golden age, one fact was already visible to anyone willing to look. While Kawasaki was building replicas of an air-cooled superbike champion, the competition was moving to liquid cooling, aluminum frames, and fuel injection. The golden age was magnificent. It was also carrying its own expiration date. The shift came fast, and it came from inside Kawasaki's own factory. In 1984, the company released the GPZ900R, the machine the world would come to know as the original Ninja. It was liquid-cooled. It used a 16-valve engine with a gear-driven balancer. It was lighter, faster, and more refined than anything the KZ1000 could answer with. The GPZ900R did not replace the KZ1000. It made the KZ1000 irrelevant as a street motorcycle overnight. The civilian KZ1000 was discontinued that same year. Eddie Lawson was already gone, racing Yamahas in Europe. The KZ1000J models that had formed the basis of the Eddie Lawson replica sat unsold on dealer floors. Mike Vaughn, who had helped conceive the ELR, remembered it plainly. The J model was a good motorcycle, he said, but it was really just a beefed-up, more modern Z1, and things were moving on. He was right. The era of the universal Japanese motorcycle, the big-bore, air-cooled, tube-framed standard that the KZ1000 had ruled, ended not with a crash, but with an evolution. Honda had the VF and VFR series. Suzuki had the GSXR. Kawasaki had the Ninja. The Superbike class went liquid overnight, and the air-cooled inline 4 went from king of the highway to relic of the showroom in less than 2 model years. You can read that 2 ways, and honest history holds both. One reading says, Kawasaki failed to evolve the KZ1000 platform into something that could compete in a liquid-cooled world. The other says, Kawasaki was shrewd enough to evolve past its own legend, rather than ride it into irrelevance. The evidence supports the second reading, but the first leaves a mark. Yet in Lincoln, Nebraska, the production line did not stop. The KZ1000P police model kept being built year after year, long after every other air-cooled superbike of its generation had been buried. The rest of Kawasaki's factories moved on to the Ninja, to the ZX series, to liquid cooling and aluminum and electronic fuel injection. Lincoln kept pouring the same engine, bolting it into the same double cradle steel frame, fitting the same Mikuni carburetors, and shipping finished police motorcycles to departments that did not care about magazine reviews or superbike championships. They cared about whether the machine would start on a January morning in Chicago, whether it would hold 110 miles per hour on a pursuit without overheating, and whether the parts from a 1985 model would fit a 1998. The answer to all 3 was yes. 23 years. Over 95% parts compatibility from the first P series to the last. The engine displacement changed once, from 1015 to 998 cubic centimeters in 1981. The chain size changed once, from 630 to 530 in 2002. LED lighting arrived in 2003. Beyond that, the bones of the machine stayed the same. It was never redesigned. It was never replatformed. It was never given a marketing refresh or a focus group makeover. It was built, it was shipped, and it was ridden until the odometer warranted a replacement. It was not stubbornness. It was engineering confidence. If a thing works, and the people who depend on it with their lives agree that it works, you do not change it to chase a specification sheet. What finally ended the KZ1000P was not failure. It was the world moving past air cooling. Emissions regulations tightened. Dunlop discontinued the 18-inch run-flat tires that every KZ1000P had worn since 1982. BMW arrived with the R1200RTP, a liquid-cooled, shaft-driven, electronically managed touring platform that gave departments anti-lock brakes, electronic stability, and heated grips. The California Highway Patrol, the agency that had made the Kawasaki police motorcycle famous, switched to BMW. In September of 2005, the last KZ1000P rolled off the Lincoln assembly line. The final model designation was the P24, 24 years of continuous production from a single factory in a single state for a single purpose. It was the end of a run that had outlasted 5 American presidents, the Cold War, the birth of the Internet, and the entire arc of the motorcycle industry's transformation from carburetors to ride-by-wire. Many departments kept their KZ1000Ps in service for years afterward, and the machines became the preferred motorcycle for firms providing funeral and VIP motor escort services, because the officers who rode them in retirement trusted them with the same certainty they had in uniform. The factory stopped. The machines did not. They survive in garages and in museums, in police collector registries, and in barns where they sit under dust covers, waiting for someone who remembers what an air-cooled inline-4 sounds like at full voice. A restored KZ1000A with original paint and matching numbers sells today for 5 to 10 times what it costs new. An Eddie Lawson replica, if you can find one of the 750 that were built for the US market, will cost you $25,000 or more, roughly 6 times its original sticker price. A decommissioned KZD1000P in correct California Highway Patrol livery commands $15,000 to $25,000 at auction, and Eric Estrada himself still owns one of the KZ1000C bikes that appeared on the show. In 2017, Warner Brothers released a Chips film adaptation. The film was mediocre. The fact that it was made at all tells you everything about the cultural permanence of those machines on that highway. But the real verdict does not come from Hollywood or from auction houses. It comes from the people who rode them, who wrenched on them, who trusted them at 130 miles per hour or at walking speed through a funeral procession. Riders who have owned one do not describe it like a motorcycle. They describe it like a fact of nature, something that was always there, always running, always ready. They talk about engines that never came apart, frames that never cracked, transmissions that shifted clean at 200,000 miles. They talk about machines that started on the second kick after sitting in a barn for a decade. The verdict of the people who rode these motorcycles is unanimous in a way that almost nothing in motorcycling ever is. Working riders do not pay collector prices for machines they do not trust. And that brings us back to the speedometer. There is a KZ1000C sitting in a collector's garage right now, somewhere in Southern California, with a fiberglass fairing and pursuit lights that will never flash again. Behind the glass of its speedometer, a needle sits frozen against the dial. You are driving a Southern California freeway in 1980, windows down, radio on, and the motorcycle in your mirror is a Kawasaki. Black and white fiberglass fairing, pursuit lights on the windshield, an officer behind it, whose right hand is 2 inches from your future. That motorcycle is a KZ1000. The one that just passed you doing 90 in the opposite direction. No lights, no badge, nothing but a rider bent into the wind. That is also a KZ1000. And when you pull into your driveway that night and turn on NBC at 8 o'clock on a Saturday, Officers Punch and John will come rolling across your television screen on the same machine, splitting lanes on the same stretch of freeway you just drove. One motorcycle owned both sides of that highway, not the left lane, not the right lane, both. And if you happened to be the one running, there was a detail about the police version you did not know until it was too late. Behind the speedometer glass sat a solenoid mechanism. The moment that officer hit the pursuit lights, a needle locked against the glass and pinned your speed, not his word against yours. Glass against fact. That is where this story begins. Not in California,